There's a story about a psychology professor who, while teaching stress management classes, walked around with a raised glass of water in her hand. Everyone expected the typical glass half full, glass half empty question. Instead, the professor asked, "How heavy is this glass of water that I'm holding?" Students shouted out answers ranging from 8 ounces to a couple of pounds. She replied, "From my perspective, the absolute weight of this glass doesn't matter. It all depends on how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute or two, it's fairly light. If I hold it for an hour straight, its weight may make my arm ache a bit. If I hold it for a whole day straight, my arm will likely cramp up and feel completely numb, forcing me to drop the glass. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it feels to me. Your stresses and worries in life are very much like this glass of water. Think about them for a while, nothing happens. Think about them a bit longer, and you begin to ache a little. Think about them all day long, and you're paralyzed and incapable of doing anything until you drop them. Obviously, this is a story about the perils of holding on too long, and implicitly about the benefits of letting go, not being weighted down. It demonstrates that the longer we hold on, the heavier the burden. You may ask yourself, well, what do we need to let go of? Let me give you some examples. Grief, a broken relationship, trauma, past emotional hurt or abuse or regret. There's also certainty, fear, expectation, anger, cravings, frustration, fatigue, the need for approval, old judgments and opinions, and the attachment to being right. And I could go on. There's a great need for letting go. Ultimately, Buddhists say that letting go is about letting go of the self. That is, about realizing that the self is not a solid, rigid, unchanging, ever-present reality, but rather a transparent, elastic, vibratory activity, better described as a verb than a noun. Besides being so often needed, letting go is often very difficult. We just seem built for hanging on. We want things to stay the same because when they are, we feel secure. When we lose someone or something that's important to us, we feel lost. It's scary. We don't know who we are anymore. It feels as if the ground has been pulled out from under us. So faced with loss or change, we hang on. We do what we can to keep things the same. As Ruth King says in The Art of Letting Go, we hold on for a number of reasons, but fundamentally, I think we hold on to things because we're afraid of death in a profound and deep way. It makes sense to me that our fear of letting go arises from our fear of death. But just as our eventual deaths are a reality, so is, as the Buddha taught, the impermanence of all life, changing moment by moment. To believe that anything is permanent and unchangeable is ultimately to deny reality. Furthermore, this is what results in suffering. We will get sick, age, and die. We will lose everything we love. These are simply the facts of life. When we don't accept them, and of course we don't a lot, we suffer. Caught up in illusions of permanence and safety, we're devastated by loss. We can't move forward. It's like we keep turning on the television to watch the same program over and over, the one that tells us how much we need something or the one that shows us how much we suffered from a certain loss. The solution is to stop turning on our emotional television, to let go. But this is a lot easier said than done. Mary Oliver captures beautifully the nature of life for us humans. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this: the fires and the black river of loss. To be alive is to lose. But Oliver continues, loss's other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. The last lines of the poem hint at what she means by salvation. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Love saves us, but only if we can let go when we lose the person, the pet, the thing we love. Love, which is what makes life worthwhile, is also why letting go is so very painful. Besides letting go being difficult to do is the mystery of how to do it. Much of what has been written about letting go addresses the process for doing so. The following description I'm going to give you of this process comes with a caveat. It's more a list of conditions that make letting go possible than one of like a step-by-step of how to do it. What allows us to let go finally is individual and mysterious. The first thing we must understand is that letting go is often not a one-time event, but rather a process. I was struck in last week's service by the notion that letting go is like composting our suffering. Necessary to this process is that we recognize, even welcome, difficult emotions that are arising and really feel them rather than pushing them away. Of course, if the emotion is too intense, we may be overwhelmed if we stay with it too long. Fresh grief over the loss of a long-term relationship is such an emotion. It results in shock and numbness. Eventually, the shock transforms into other emotions, perhaps anger or depression or sadness or other feelings. I think the changing nature of grief is one example of the letting go process. But besides recognizing and letting painful emotions flow, the experts recommend a variety of activities that might help us let go. Many of these have to do with being kind to ourselves. We need to be gentle and compassionate, not judgmental or in any way very harsh with ourselves. And we need to take care of ourselves, to eat well, to exercise, and get enough sleep. It's also important to surround ourselves with people and activities that bring us joy. They can offset the pain and suggest a different direction merely by their presence. They remind us of the life we want, a happy, peaceful life. It's also important to have people we can talk to, for talking about what happened can relieve our pain and help us let go. We might also create a positive mantra to counter painful thoughts. Here's an example. I am fortunate to be finding a new path in life, one that is good for me. In some cases, such as a relationship's having broken up or the loss of a job, creating physical distance might help. Not being constantly reminded of a loss or having to think about what was lost can create space for investigation, which is a very important part of this process. We need understanding to move forward, and the key to understanding is to practice mindfulness. As Ruth King said in that opening reading, meditation is an effective practice for learning how to be mindful and how to let go. As we sit experiencing our breath coming and going, watching our thoughts, emotions, and sensations coming and going, we experience each moment and let it go over and over again. Crucial here is the practice of being mindful of things as they arise and fall away. We do not judge or get caught up in trying to explain what arises. We simply notice and let go. Sometimes mindfulness alone can allow us to let go to some extent. But when we hang on and get tense, depressed, or fatigued, we can stop and examine our experience. First of all, we can drop into our bodies and feel the effects of being stuck, heat or contraction or pulsing or other sensations. We can associate sensations with emotions, for example, a tight stomach with fear. We can see how our stories glorify or vilify us or others, and then question our interpretation, trying to see from another perspective, creating new stories. In the course of investigating, we may see clearly that people hurt us in unacceptable ways. Even if so, even though it may be difficult, we must try to understand why they may have done what they did and try to forgive them. This does not mean to forget what happened or to allow it to happen again without consequences. It does not even mean that we will stay in such relationships, but sometimes explaining to those who hurt us why and how they did so can allow the relationship to grow and deepen. In any case, forgiving is what we do for ourselves so that we can let go of our hurt and our anger and move on. Those we forgive may not apologize, may not be ready to accept responsibility, and may not be able to engage in building a better relationship. But we can be free of resenting them for hurting us. Clearly, letting go is a mysterious and sometimes difficult process. For one thing, we all differ, and situations calling for letting go vary. Sometimes we get so stuck that we cannot go forward without professional help. A good therapist can guide us through the process of letting go. When we find we have overburdened ourselves and our friends with our difficulties, it's time to seek help from people who care but are not directly and daily affected by our struggle. Let's turn now to the last word in my title, into. I've kind of been hinting about this all along, but what are we letting go into? Because letting go provides such a release, there may seem to be nothing left to say. Having the weight of suffering lifted is a great gift, one sufficient to make us want to let go. But I don't think release is an adequate word for what happens when we fully let go. Freedom comes closer to describing what we move into when we let go of suffering. We are free of what we've been carrying, but we are also free to move forward. We are unstuck. Our suffering has deepened into wisdom and compassion. We can see new choices, new directions for our lives. We release our creativity and our caring. We can grow. The world opens up for us. We can savor the present with all of its possibilities. And in this place, there is joy. In the final line of my favorite Buddhist prayer, "And may we know the joy of our true nature," the joy referred to is the joy of freedom from suffering. We are born with this capacity for joy. It's our true nature, and we see this clearly in babies and children, wide-eyed and full of wonder at each new moment. We learn to suffer by developing an ego. It becomes more and more all about me, my, and mine. Then it is all about what I want and don't want, and about holding on to the former and resisting the latter. Both keep us stuck and suffering. Ultimately, we need to let go of this ego. We need to recognize that it's inevitable that we don't get what we want sometimes. It's not personal. It's not about us. It's just the way things are. Everyone experiences pain, illness, aging, and death. Everything is impermanent, constantly changing. What arises ultimately passes away. It's just the nature of life. Caught up in our egos, we long for permanence and try to hold on to what we love. This is only human. But the tighter we grip what we love, the more likely it is to leave us. Love is only love when it is free to come and go as needed. When we try to possess or control love, it becomes grasping or attachment, not love. It becomes mine and not ours, and is liable to feel suffocating for all involved. What is true of love is true of all life. Holding on leads to suffering. Holding on tightly leads to suffering. Letting go leads to freedom and joy. May we all learn how to compost our suffering and free our spirits into joy. May it be so.